Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. Now sit down, sit down, sit down. I want to thank Scott for that incredible introduction and for his support over the years. You all know what a fine human being he is and what it means to have his support. It's enormously important to me and to John. I also want to take a minute to, I know that behind the curtain we have huge production staff that's working, and out among us we have servers who are making certain that you have a splendid time tonight, and I want to make certain that we get an opportunity. Our server is Scott. I want to thank all of them. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be sharing this stage with so many people who are committed supporters of HRC, who have made the courageous fight for equal justice the cause of their lives. Unfortunately, of course, despite all the talent and energy in this room and in rooms like this across the country, there's still a long way to go, as we've been reminded again. I wrote this speech a few days ago, and then I was in Sacramento yesterday and rewrote it last night. Because we were in fact reminded again. While we share the lingering memory of a fence post in Laramie, the sorrow of that image is now joined by a park at Lake Natoma in Sacramento. And Matthew Shepard is joined by Satinder Singh as a martyr in that fight for justice. I had planned a different speech today. You may be glad I'm not giving it, talking about a lot of issues dear to you, but also a lot of sort of campaign issues, kinds of things that you're probably tired of hearing. But for the commitment of John's campaign to ENDA, to the funding of the Ryan White Care Act, to the reform of 1,100 federal laws that discriminate against same-sex couples, to the end of the foolish don't ask, don't tell policy in the Department of Defense. This is, I have to say, a policy that didn't become wrong. It was always wrong. But the events in Sacramento and the mounting escalation of the war against the LGBT community made me pause last night as I read the stories. And of course, economic security is important. So we want to assure, for example, that the surviving spouse receives the Social Security benefits, regardless of whether the relationship was homosexual or heterosexual. But the right to live without fear of physical violence against yourselves or against your families is more than important. For you, it's essential, and for us as a nation, it's a moral imperative. I have to admit that personally, I'm bewildered by a number of things. I'm bewildered that so much attention has been paid to my remarks here a few weeks ago, because I think that it shouldn't be something that is remarkable. But I'm also bewildered by the kind of hatred that we witnessed in Sacramento. I do believe that the violence erupted there and took the life of Satinder Singh, like the brutality that left a beaten Matthew Shepard to die on a cattle fence simply because he was gay. I believe that that violence is possible because first there were words of hate. In 2000, Elie Wiesel was speaking at the Millennium Lectures. These were excellent discussions of where we are as a nation, where we are as a planet. And he talked about violent hatred. Of course, he well knows the worst that bigotry can spawn. And he says that violent hatred is possible because first there were words of hatred that we tolerated. It's true that we need real and enforceable national hate crimes legislation, and then we need to give local authorities the power and the means to punish those who seek out to do harm to people simply because of their sexual orientation. We need to be just, and we need to deliver justice. But it's more than that. We need a universal understanding of what it means to be gay in America today, for people in this country to truly understand that, of the realities of living in a society where many gay people have grown to expect a level of violence against them. And then we need a national commitment. I'd like to think it was a national recommitment to decency and respect, a national reverence for justice, a national intolerance of prejudice. When Ann Coulter attempted to attack my husband by using a repugnant word, I know that's when her name comes, everybody's supposed to do that thing. Very good. She didn't just attack John, and frankly, she didn't just attack gays. She attacked decency and respect among all of us. When gay and lesbian young people face verbal abuse in their schools, as they do across this country, and school administrators merely nod and wink, it's not just the mental health of these young people that's at risk. Our collective moral health is at risk. When a nominee for Surgeon General of the United States dismisses as uninstructive, without apology or repudiation, his statements made as an adult and as a physician that homosexuality was abnormal, the government itself risks abetting these hate mongers. You are threatened under a guise of scientific certitude, and we, as a nation, each one of us, are diminished. When political campaigns are waged in this country, fueled by ginning up fear and misunderstanding and hatred, it's not simply that the administration then feels that they're empowered to appoint judges whose reference point is ugly and exclusionary ideology that hurts your community. It's also that that judiciary contradicts our basic national ideals of equality and civil rights. This president, aren't you like a sentence that starts that way? This president talks a lot, that's this line again, talks a lot about good and evil and the need to seek out, you've heard him, seek out evildoers, but he doesn't seem to recognize the evil and hate crimes. The right to live without the fear of being murdered for whom we love is not a special right. And despite the loss of a generation of gay men, this administration remains still unwilling to effectively address HIV and AIDS pandemic. Instead of proven and effective prevention methods based on science and experience, they still put ideology first. For all of their talk of compassion, these conservatives are now willing to write off another generation and ignore the epidemic in the African American community. John fully supports the Early Treatment for HIV Act. Support for early treatment is a moral imperative. It should not be dependent. Your care should not be dependent on a patient's economic status as it is today. This is not just an African American issue. It's not just a crisis in all of our communities of color. It's not just a crisis among poor people. It is, in fact, a world crisis, as we see across the world ideological impairments to a robust response to the spread of HIV/AIDS. Since being sworn in, George Bush has never advocated a single policy that protects the rights of gays and lesbians. Not hate crimes, not pension protection, not ENDA, not hospital visitation, nothing. And not surprisingly, the only policy he has supported is amending the Constitution to discriminate against you. This can, of course, change. Just like those of you in the room who are parents, John and I have tried to instill in our children a reverence for justice and an intolerance for prejudice. And I have to say, I think we've done a pretty good job, because we were trying to explain prejudice to our son Jack, who is now 7, and he could not understand the words we were using. He only looked at it quizzically. It was a concept that he could not grasp. And that's because none of us are born anti-black or anti-Muslim or anti-woman or anti-gay or lesbian. It's a learned behavior, which, and although it doesn't seem like this, that's actually good news, because it means that we can change it. It's a road, this road of change that you've been on, but it's also a road that the whole nation has been on. You've seen it in your own families, among your straight friends. As they've grown in understanding, they left behind, relegated to their own history books, the prejudice that they once learned in church pews and classrooms. We've all seen it as the country has grown in recognition that we cannot call ourselves a country of compassion or decency, a country of equality, while at the same time treating a vital segment among us as unworthy of equal treatment, as unworthy of even basic physical protection. Beginning in 1966, I participated in an online grief group One of the people with whom I struck up a friendship was a lesbian woman whose longtime partner was beside her when their car was struck. Her partner's parents, this is 1996, would not have let her into the hospital room for the weeks her partner lingered before death. And her parents then changed the locks on the apartment that the couple had shared for a decade. I had lesbian friends, but no one had ever shared with me in the way that this woman had, in so much pain, what unequal treatment meant in her life. I watched and grieved with her as she came to terms with one loss after another, a loss of her partner in love and in life, and a loss of her history with her. You know the stories, and too many of you have lived them. I don't think as a nation that we understand the connection between our acceptance of her pain, of her unequal treatment, and the events of Laramie and Lake Natoma. Once we are willing to say that any human being standing beside us doesn't have the same inheritance rights or hospital visitation rights or pension or health care benefits, once we say that they don't have the same rights to a legal relationship with their own children, we are saying that that human being, because of the person that they love, is a proper target of discrimination. And then we fool ourselves into thinking that we have no responsibility when that human being is in fact targeted. People of goodwill need to stop thinking that this is someone else's problem. This is someone else's doing, and take responsibility for allowing, often by our silence, a culture of prejudice. How can we profess as a nation horror at the hate crimes of Abu Ghraib against Muslims while refusing to protect Americans here from violence based on sexual orientation or gender identity? It's so clear that we need, in this time, moral leadership, a new leadership that will not simply oppose and remove all of DOMA, but will stand with you, with the understanding that whether we are heterosexuals, transsexuals, bisexuals, or homosexuals, we are brothers and sisters. A leader who believes that I am not free if you are not free. And I'm hopeful because I think that that leadership is waiting in the wings, waiting to change the national dialogue from exclusion to inclusion, from hate to cooperation, from violence to peace. I'm hopeful because I know my husband's deep commitment to the ideal of equal justice, a commitment born of seeing the harm done to all of us, not just to African Americans, that he saw in the South in the 50s and 60s, and the strength that he saw in men and women who opposed them, strength I see as I look out across this room. I'm hopeful because you're here, unintimidated by the distance that we still have to go as a nation, unswayed by the fact that we have accomplished so little on a national level for too many decades. What you do for yourself, you also do it for me. You also do it for the gay student who's bullied in school, for the transsexual who fears being fired, for the lesbian who knows that if her partner dies before she does, she may not have any parental rights over her own children, for the person with HIV who cannot afford critical medication, for the gay man who is the victim of hate crimes, for your families and for my family, for your children and for my children, for all of us. In the memory of Matthew and Satender and their brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters, we continue to fight. Thank you, my brothers and sisters.